This video was about 9 months in the making. Starting in the summer of last year, I started watching the Black Dice Society, the official Ravenloft actual play, which I think was originally hosted on the Black Dice Society's own YouTube, but it was also hosted on the official D&D YouTube and is still there today. I decided to watch all 60-ish episodes whenever I could, during lunch, household chores, and so on. And 180-ish hours of YouTube viewing later, I've recently finished the final episode. I think it works out to like an hour a day, every day for the last half a year plus. I wanted to do a video talking about it, what it covers, and what you can use for your Ravenloft or Curse of Strahd game. Welcome to DM in the Mists, covering all things Curse of Strahd and Ravenloft. Black Dice Society, the Ravenloft actual play, ran for 2 seasons from 2021 to 2022. So it kind of started around 1 or 2 months before Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft came out, I believe. I mostly watch from a playlist, and I'll include a link in the description. However, it's missing a few episodes, the final 2, and a bonus episode. So I'll also include those as separate links. Also, a heads up, when you start listening to it, the first episode starts with some music while they're waiting for it to start, and it is loud. So be careful when you start the first episode. Before I go on much further, I was torn about whether to mention this or not. Even though it finished in 2022, about sort of 6-ish months ago, or maybe a year ago, it was revealed that there was a controversy between the DM and a player. I was not going to mention it, but then I mentioned this, I was doing this video in another comment on another video, and somebody says, oh, you're going to talk about the controversy? And I was like, well, I don't want to not talk about it. So I'm going to say it exists, but I'm not going to go into detail about what happened. I'm sure if you were that way inclined, you could have a look and research it separately. But I thought probably best to at least address it rather than ignore it or avoid it. Just heads up, there's spoilers in this for the Black Dice Society, obviously, but also for Curse of Strahd and Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft content, and for the Wild Beyond the Witchlight as well, because they transitioned into that for a few episodes. Plus, it's linked to Ravenloft. I'll try not to reveal too much. I'm not going to tell you everything that happens in case you decide to watch it for yourself, but I will be discussing key plot points and maybe a couple of spoilers and big reveals. The DM is B. Dave Walters, who I remember first seeing DMing for some of the Stranger Things cast. Plus, I think I've seen him in a few other things, but I can't quite remember what now. And there were 6 players. Tanya DePass, known as Cypher of Tia. She played Fen, a drow Dhampir bloodhunter/warlock, and she was initially part of the Ravenloft Carnival and partner to Isolde. Mark Meir played Brother Uriah McCorber, human grave cleric of Ezra. Great flavour for the Church of Ezra is provided. It's revealed, big spoiler, it's revealed that he's actually a clone of Aslan Rex. That is really cool. For those of you who don't know, Aslan Rex is the big boss lich in Ravenloft lore, probably the second most famous Darklord after Strahd himself. And if you've read I Strahd the War Against Aslan, you know who Aslan is. Mark also plays Faran Zalhonen. I did a whole video about him. And Aslan Rex, as well as Uriah. And he also DM'd a couple of sessions as well, giving B-Dave the opportunity to play as Hermos the Half-Giant from the Carnival. DJ Knight played Desmond Droons, human lycanthrope ranger. I did that voice because he did a lot of voice modifier stuff whenever he was in werewolf lycanthrope form. It's revealed later on, quite near the end actually, that his father was killed by Harkon Lucas, who's Darklord of Cartacus. And his brother later on becomes a full-blooded vampire, I believe. Not just a vampire spawn, but a true full vampire turned by Strahd. Nora Ibrahim played Nahara, reborn Asima warlock/bard, who it's later revealed is also a Tatiana reincarnation, so that was quite interesting. She used to do random Taroka card pulls, which were really cool, and they always seemed to be quite accurate to what was going on, which is quite weird. And also separately played the Raven Queen once or twice. Sage Ryan played Valentine, a reborn, I believe half-elf sorcerer, who had ties to the Godbrain, or her the Godbrain, the Mind Flayers of Blurtspur, and had an aberrant spirit in her head named Chegram. And last but certainly not least, Becca Scott played Tatiana, Air Genasi barbarian druid with a Russian accent. And yes, the name made me double take as well. I don't know if that was accidental or on purpose, but she was called Tatiana, but she had nothing to do with being a Tatiana reincarnation, for those of you who know the Curse of Strahd lore. So it was a cool mix of PCs in the end, and it was also cool that 3 of them were different Van Richten's Guide lineages. Although a shame we didn't have a Hexblood and have one of all 3, but it was cool still having 2 Reborn and a Dhampir. They all also appear on Idle Champions for any of you who played or still play that mobile game. And I think there's different forms as well, like there's got 2 or 3 different skins or whatever they're called. My favourite player was probably Mark Meir. Did an amazing job with juggling Uriah, Ferran, and Azalin. Sometimes in the same conversation, they'd be talking and he's bouncing between the voices, and you'd have the nervous, stuttering Uriah talking to the very smooth and charismatic Ferran, and then the very evil Azalin Rax. And he just did it effortlessly. It was mind-blowingly good. But my favourite PC had to be Tatiana. She was hilarious. Becca Scott had me laughing so many times. It was awesome. My favourite moment probably was when they were fighting the caller, of all things, and she wild-shaped into a flying dinosaur. And the caller was playing a lot of like mind games and that kind of thing with them, and said, if your old mentor could see you now, she'd be so embarrassed of you. And Tatiana's response, ah! Because she was a flying dinosaur. What else could she say? But I thought all the PCs and players were great. They actually said in one of the early episodes in the introduction, B-Dave was saying that one of the players had received an email from just a random person telling them they should try harder. So that wasn't very nice. And while some of the players were actors or had actor backgrounds, one or two of them didn't. And you could kind of tell the difference. But you know what? I thought it was good because it felt like they were D&D players. It didn't feel like they were actors. It felt like they were just regular people playing D&D. And it felt more natural, more authentic. And I actually really liked that. The first episode was in the House of Lament, but they didn't finish it. They actually returned to it and finish it off in a later episode. And then when they start the series properly, the story starts with the wedding of Desmond's brother, Armand, and Veronica in Koshmar, which I believe is a homebrewed world, especially for this. And Valentine and Tatiana are also from there. However, the wedding is sadly ruined by an attack by Lord Soth, and it's such a cool watch. They end up in the Mists and find Uriah, Fen, and Nahara, who are all natives of the Domains of Dread. Fen is with the Carnival, but is originally from the Underdark. Uriah is from Darkon, and Nahara is from... ? It's revealed she's lived multiple lives, and so has lived in many different Domains of Dread. Cue that Johnny Cash song, I've Been Everywhere, Man. There's a good mix of Outlanders, that's people outside the Domains of Dread, and Domain of Dread natives, 3 of each. From there, mostly from the Carnival, they visit other Domains of Dread and also the Feywild, courtesy of the Witchlight. And they were joined by guest players as well. V-Muse played Veronica, the homebrewed NPC, who's an Eladrin, raised to be the Queen of Koshmar. She was, I believe, the most prominent and recurring guest overall. Jason Cowell played Strahd. I liked the way he played Strahd as well. It kind of reminded me of Gus Fring in Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul in his style. I don't know if that's intentional or not. Like he was like, I'm going to do a Gus Fring thing, or just happened to do his own thing, and it was similar to that. But that's what it reminded me of. If Gus Fring was a vampire, i.e. even more terrifying. Todd Stashwick, who I remember being a villain in Heroes, for those of you who remember the TV show Heroes, played Rudolph van Richten, and he was great. He just fit the vibe perfectly, especially in, I think, the last episode he appears. And in that episode, he has a pet Quasit in his shop in Mordant, and I just thought the dynamic between them was hilarious. Omega Jones, who's known as Critbard, played Harkon Lucas. I thought he was great. He was like adding sort of like singing and stuff, like not like singing, like turning it into a musical, but just like he'd be talking something and he might sing a line of something, that kind of thing. It worked well. And possibly my favorite guest of the lot, Lucky Yates, who I think I only know him from Archer. He did the voice of Dr. Krieger, and he did Piddlewick too. Now, I understand that as one of his sort of side projects, he's a puppeteer and actually makes his own puppets. And he made this puppet of Piddlewick 2 based on the art in Curse of Strahd. And in Curse of Strahd, Piddlewick 2 doesn't talk, but he voiced Piddlewick 2, and he was absolutely hilarious. I think there were 3 episodes in total that he was in, and he was brilliant. He was like a show stealer, and it was funny seeing the cast break, B-Dave trying his hardest not to laugh and things like that. And Piddlewick 2 in the Black Dice Society timeline becomes the Dark Lord of Odair, or Odiari, I think it was called in the old lore. But Odair, because of course he does. That, if not the best episode, was definitely the funniest. Other guests included Jim Zub, who I think is a comic artist for a lot of the 5th edition D&D comics. He played Lord Soth at Gen Con. And Paul Foxcroft played Van Richten in the final episode because Todd Stashwick couldn't make it, I believe. All the guests were great. It felt like they knew their roles well. And I think some of the D&D fans were even Ravenloft fans anyway, which probably would have helped. NPCs-wise, most of the Mist Wanderers from Van Richten's guide were included. We had the Caller, Erasmus Van Richten, Ferran Zalhonen, Jander Sunstar, and by extension Savra Sunstar, Rudolph Van Richten, and the Weathermay-Foxgrove twins. I think the only ones that we didnn have were Alan and Arthur, Esmeralda, and Larissa Snowmain. which is fair enough. You can't include everyone. I was a bit gutted that Ez wasn't in it, because I do love Ez. She's probably one of my favourites. Plus, there are other non-Darklord NPCs, such as Savra, as mentioned, Elise from Lemordia, Bjorn Horseman from Volkovnia, Alcio Metis and Madame Talisvari, Eris of Darkon, Ebb, which is Aslin's Black Shadow Dragon, and probably a few more I've forgotten to mention. All the domains they went to. Hopefully I've remembered them all. Hopefully I've got this all right. In rough order: the House of Lament, the Carnival, Volkovnia, Forlorn, Blurtspur, Darkon, Mordant. It was around here they had their Feywild interlude, a la Witchlight, the Riders Bridge, Lemordia, Barovia, with parts of it playing out similar to Curse of Strahd, Cartacus, although I believe they pronounced it Cartacus, which might be the right. I'm not saying that I'm right and they're wrong, and they're probably pronouncing it right. Sithicus, Claw, Vaj Agency. I say Vaj, but I think they said, I can't remember, and I should have double checked before doing this video. I think it was like Vargay Agency, Oder or Odiari. And there was also a couple of bonus episodes, including Sire 1313, The Morning Rail, and The Nightmare Lands. There were other bonus episodes, but I don't think they're available to watch anymore, sadly. But I don't think they introduced any other canon domains beyond what I've already listed. Plus, a bunch of domains were name dropped as well. I think Tepest, Borka, and Tovag might have been. I think I remember B-Dave saying that the Black Dice Society ended prematurely. It might be tied to that controversy I mentioned earlier. I'd love to know what other domains were planned for if they continued. They also went to the Feywild and the Witchlight Carnival for a few episodes near the end of Season 1, tying into the World Beyond the Witchlight's release. I watched all of that too, rather than skipping ahead for when they returned to Ravenloft, just in case any Ravenlofty type stuff happened. But I did prefer the Ravenlofty stuff. I preferred when they were in the Domains of Dread than when they were in the Feywild. But it was all still good. What's interesting is that the show started before Van Richten's Guide came out. And I can't remember this 100% now, but I'm pretty sure that in the first few episodes, they established the core before Van Richten's came out. And in Van Richten's Guide, there is no core. So I wondered if they assumed the core was going to be in it. And then they were like, oh, the core, for those of you who don't know, in older pre-5th edition Ravenloft, all the domains kind of joined together as a continent. And they still had mist borders around the domains and things like that. But it's not like the current thing where they're all sort of separate pocket domains scattered about everywhere. And it also included Lord Soth and Sithicus, who were from older editions of Ravenloft, but not 5th edition and Van Richten's Guide. I told myself this would be more sort of like an overview video where I kind of just tell you what was included and tell you the flavour, and not a review video where I say, this is what I like, this is what I didn't like. But I will talk about what I liked and didn't like. Overall, it was great. I enjoyed watching it. I thought B-Dave was a great DM. I loved it each time a new domain or a recognisable NPC was introduced. I'd be like, no way, it's such a domain, or it's that person. They covered lots of domains and lots of NPCs. They squeezed a lot into it, which was great. It might have been boring if they, say, spent 10, 15, 20 sessions in just one domain, but they hopped a lot. The domain hopped a lot. Some of the reveals were great. Voronika later becomes a Darklord of Koshmar, the land that she was from, is basically sucked into the Domains of Dread. And they did a great thing where she was on the episode, but said she was having camera trouble. She was on the move. She was in like a hotel room. But they still had the black box next to where she appeared. And then right at the end of the episode, they reveal the camera. Instead of the clothes she wore in previous episodes, she's wearing this sort of like black dress. And the characters' faces, the other players were like, whoa, it was so cool. It was a great reveal. I liked how it started with a wedding and ended with a wedding as well. I thought it was a cool sort of full circle thing. The ending was not a happy ending for all the players, for all the PCs, which makes for a great horror campaign ending. Sad and bittersweet. I won't spoil it for you. You can watch it for yourself. And maybe this was just for me. I liked how it was very non-sweary. So I've got 2 kids. Sometimes I watch or listen to these videos when they're maybe in the next room and can hear some of the stuff. Obviously, like, I'd be very careful. It was like any sort of really dark, gross, gory moments. I'd be like, right, I'm not going to watch it now with the kids here. And most of the times I did watch it when I was like, the kids were in school or whatever. But the only people who ever swore would usually be like in a really extreme moment, or it'd be the guests. Maybe the guests didn't get the memo that you're not meant to swear. And I do remember there was like I think it was the final episode, the guy who played Van Richten did this really loud F-bomb, and I'm like, oops. And now sadly onto the sort of less good stuff. I hate hating on stuff, but I don't want to look like a bootlicker or a brown noser. I actually spoke to B-Dave on Blue Sky recently, so I have no idea if he's going to watch this, so apologies in advance if you do. And I feel like a lot of these are minor and nitpicky. I felt like I was watching a play with dice rolls rather than a D&D campaign, but I think that's true of a lot of the especially popular actual plays. I've not watched many, to be completely honest with you. Things like the cliffhangers were really smooth. They'd have a cliffhanger mid-episode just before they went to break and at the end of the episode, and it felt a bit too smooth. But then again, if it was like real life D&D and they ended a session in the middle of like just a small, minor, trivial, random encounter, I don't think that's going to incentivize people to keep watching. So I can completely understand how and why they did it. And they did it masterfully, to be fair. It just sort of didn't feel realistically like real D&D. Got to bear in mind as well that essentially this was an advert for different D&D products, not just playing D&D as a whole, but for Van Richten's Guide and Witchlight. The idea being people watch this and say, hey, I want to run a Ravenloft campaign or a Witchlight campaign. So it makes sense that it'd be like that. Some of the roleplay moments were a bit slow, especially when it's just like two PCs talking to each other. Or there was quite a few characters that had like a voice in their head, you know, a warlock patron or something of that effect. And it's character building, and it gave the chance for B-Day's voice to rest, so he's not doing all the talking. But I felt like they were a little bit slower and less enjoyable than when it was like all the group doing stuff. Some of the combat was a little disappointing. The one that jumps out to me is the Headless Rider from the Rider's Bridge. That said, they knew he was coming, and so they prepared and had ready actions and used buff spells and set a trap. But it just meant that, like, by the time they took him down, he only got, like, one attack off. And I don't think it was even, like, an axe attack. It was, like, a ranged attack. And I was just like, oh, I could have had the fear of one person nearly having their head chopped off. But in all fairness, a lot of the combat was good. And I remember the caller fight in Brewery as being particularly epic. They were quite loosey-goosey with the rules and followed rule of cool a lot. I'll give one anecdote where, you know, a round in combat is 6 seconds, 10 rounds is a minute. And one person had a like 20-second conversation. This is what during combat and in initiative, one person had like a 20-second conversation with somebody and then turned and had a 20-second conversation with a different PC and then turned and had a 20-second conversation with with an NPC that time or with the person they were fighting. And I just thought a bit like, yeah, if it were me, but I'm not a theatrical DM. I'm probably follow the rules too strictly. I'd probably be a bit like you've got 6 seconds and you're doing a lot of the talking. And one player, and they will remain nameless, always seem to roll above a 15 and seem to have a natural 20 every 4 to 5 rolls, which, unless they're the luckiest person in the universe, and they should probably buy lottery tickets, was probably choosing to make themselves look good. And lastly, there were some sound issues as well. B-Dave, the DM, was often the quietest, especially in like the later episodes in season 2. But hey, they played live. It's hard to get audio right at the best of times, especially with multiple participants doing it online and especially live. You know, cut them some slack, I guess. I think they did a great job, all things considered. All right, and now to the fun stuff. Let's talk about the flavor you can add from Black Dice Society and add to your Ravenloft or Curse of Strahd games. Probably more Ravenloft than Curse of Strahd, but a lot of these probably overlap. So they did quite a few random side adventures. The beauty of the mists and the dark powers of Ravenloft is the PCs can be dragged away somewhere else at any moment. I mean, you can add in side adventures. One that particularly stood out is that they realized they're actually mind flayers for an episode. They're mind flayers from Blurtspur on a mission. And it was really cool seeing them kind of act and role play differently and working off stat blocks instead of their usual character sheets. I think that was episode 15, season 1, episode 15, if you want to watch it for yourself. They also did similar things with Sire 1313, the Nightmare Lands, and the Rider's Bridge. They're just pulled away for one session, and then the next session, they're just kind of back to normal, almost like pick up where they left off. So that could be something to consider if you've got a player who can't make it one session, but you want to carry on with everyone else. But then you've got the risk that they'll miss out on that session, which could have been a lot of fun. Hey, it'd be a lot of fun to play a Mind Flayer one session. I think this is quite common for a lot of Curse of Strahd and Ravenloft games, is to have a pre-Domain of Dread prologue. You know, a lot of the Curse of Strahd adventure hooks are you start in the Sword Coast in Daggerford or near Daggerford, and you know you get dragged into Barovia. They did this by having the wedding in Koshmar ruined by Lord Soth, and the three of them dragged into the mists. Obviously, this wouldn't work if you're running a, say, Ravenloft game where all of the natives are from the Domains of Dread. This may not work unless they're say the prologue happens in a different, more peaceful Domain of Dread, and they're dragged into wherever the story starts. You can consider having a PC in a relationship with an important NPC, obviously with the PC's blessing. Fen was in a relationship with the Solday of the Carnival, and it justified them using the Carnival as a base, and meant they were more likely to want to help the Carnival to help a Solday find the caller. It meant it was a good source of exposition and lore for them, and the Carnival especially, more so than other domains, because it's well-travelled, you know, fill in a lot of the gaps and tell them a lot of stuff. Although I kind of think this could be a bad thing in a horror campaign. The beauty of Curse of Strahd and the sort of hook and the setup is they arrive in this strange land. They don't know where they are. They don't know how they can leave. They don't know anyone. And admittedly, they can learn some stuff pretty quickly by just talking to a few random people in the village of Barovia. But it's that whole thing of like not knowing where you've turned up or not knowing where you're going to go. So having too much exposition and lore kind of removes from that, I feel. So if you do decide to do something like this, just proceed with caution, or maybe don't do it right away, or maybe have it be an NPC who only knows a little stuff, not a lot of stuff. You could consider having a PC be a Mistwalker. This is a dark gift from Van Richten's guide, and I think Nahara was a Mistwalker, if I remember correctly. Specifically the part in the Mist Traveller section of the write-up for the Mistwalker Dark Gift where it says, when you enter the mists intent on reaching a specific domain, you are treated as if you possess a Mist Talisman keyed to that domain. So they did have Mist Talismans. I do remember them like using them and stuff, but I don't think they necessarily had to have one for everywhere they wanted or needed to go, and that's a good way around that. So by having a Mistwalker PC or NPC ally could be a lot easier for them to reach different domains, which is handy if you're doing a domain hopping campaign. This I really liked and would think about adding to my game. Different Mist Talismans alert different groups of the PC's pending arrival. So this is when they were going to go return to the House of Lament. They had an axe, that was Dolk Dranzorg's Berserker axe, and a planchette they could use as Mist Talismans. And through a wisdom check, they were told that if they used a specific type of Mist Talisman, it might alert different groups of their arrival. If they used the axe, it would alert Dolk Dranzorg that they're coming and he would know that they arrived. And I think that's a really cool idea, rather than being like this tool of just, it gets you in the domain and that's it. Depending on what type of Mist Talisman you use and who it's tied to, it might affect whether or not they know you've arrived. Maybe sort of tweak it to be that they arrive in a different part of the domain, perhaps, something like that. Lots to play with there, I feel. That was 24 minutes into Season 1, Episode 11, if you want to discover that for yourself. Similarly, Mist Talismans can lead you to a person, not a domain. Could be an option. Near the end of Season 2, Savra Sunstar asks the characters to help her find Jander. She doesn't know where he is, but has one of his vampire teeth. And they realise they can use that as a Mist Talisman, and that can lead them to the domain he's in. I think that's a really cool idea. It means they're going somewhere and they don't actually know what domain they'll end up in, only that the NPC they're looking for should be there. That was Season 2, Episode 22. Darklords as patrons. I don't think this is anything new, and I think quite a few people do this. And in fact, Van Richten's guide suggests Azalin and the Darklords as potential patrons to the Undead Warlock subclass. During Black Dice Society, Azalin, Strahd, and Faran all become Warlock patrons for different people. I think it's a cool idea that helps to tie the characters into the domains of Dread more. Flavor for wielding Nepenthe. I thought this was really cool. So Fen borrows Isolde's sword, Nepenthe, the true Dark Lord of the Carnival, to try and take out the caller for Isolde. And I just remember it's only like a minute long. Season 2, Episode 5, about the 1 hour 56 mark, but I just remember that being really good flavour for what it's like to wield Nepenthe. Time shifts. Again, I don't think this is anything radical. You know, I've heard this can be quite a common, cool thing to do in a Ravenloft campaign. Seen it discussed on Curse of Strahd subreddit quite a bit. With the mists and the dark powers being what they are, some folks have it that time moves differently in the domains of Dread. When they go to Barovia and return to the Carnival, they find out that a few years have passed, but for them it's only been a few weeks. A girl they rescued from Folkovnia, in fact, is now a teenager. What's worse, because Fen took Nepenthe, the Carnival couldn't go anywhere and was stuck in Lamordia the whole time. And ironically, Isolde thought Fen had betrayed her, whereas the reality of it was Fen was helping her by killing the caller for her. And later on, after they're let go by a redeemed sloth in Sithicus, they wake up in a Spelljammer ship and later find out that 40 years has passed, but they haven't even aged. Stuff like that is really interesting because you get to see how things have changed in that time, how the locations have changed, how people have changed, how much older they've gotten. For example, the weathermay-foxgrove twins were now in their 50s or 60s instead of being teenagers or early 20-somethings. I haven't done this, but I have considered it because my players in my game started with Lost Mine of Phandelver, which is set in the Sword Coast. We did that before they transitioned into Curse of Strahd and then Ravenloft. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if they went back to Phandalin, which is the main town in Lost Mine of Phandelver, and 100 years has passed or something when it's only been like a year for them. You can consider having a friend/ally NPC become a Dark Lord. As mentioned earlier, Voronika, a friendly NPC, becomes a Dark Lord at the end of Season 1. She shoos the PCs out of a newly formed domain rather than fighting them. I thought it was a really cool, unexpected, and horrifying moment. She was a love interest of one of the PCs as well. And she was, up until that point, she seemed nice. She seemed good. And obviously, with everything that happened to her, she'd become corrupted and become a Dark Lord. It was great. You could consider doing something similar for your games. Switching the Tatiana reincarnation around. So I thought originally Veronica was going to be an Irina reincarnation because you look at the banner and it shows a red-headed woman in a bridal gown stood next to Strahd. Turns out I was very wrong. Not only was Nahara the Tatiana reincarnation, but they reflavored Irina to have black hair instead of red hair. So they changed Irina to match Nahara, not the other way around. And I thought it was an interesting spin on things. I should mention as well, for older Ravenloft fans, I think this is a 5th edition Van Richten's Guide suggestion of having having a Tatiana reincarnation appear outside Barovia. I mean, it happened in the Vampire of the Mists novel, right? Sort of. And so I think that's what they went with Nahara. And finally, the Witch Carnival tie-in. As explained in my How I Ran the Carnival video, the Ravenloft Carnival and the Witchlight Carnival are tied. And it explains it in both Van Richten's Guide, but especially so in the Witchlight book. So this gave them an incentive to go to the Feywild, which they did for a few episodes. I don't know if I'd do this. I'd like to kind of keep things in the Domains of Dread as much as possible, but it is an option. Alternatively, you could consider having the Witchlight Carnival visit the Shadowfell instead, or the Domains of Dread. That way you can keep them in the Domains of Dread, but still do the tie-in. Maybe the Dark Power is spirited away from the Feywild to the Domains of Dread. That's it. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me. I can't promise I remember everything. Like I said, some of the episodes I watched over 6 months ago, but I can at least try and help guide you and say if you're looking for some of the things I mentioned or which domain is tied to this video, I'll see what I can do. There is a Black Dice Society wiki, but not all the episode info is on there, and a lot of the episode descriptions are quite vague, almost like sort of TV episode synopsis. So it doesn't tell you, they go to this domain and do this thing. It's kind of like, oh no, these spooky shenanigans are going on. What's going to happen today? Yeah, so it's kind of hard to sort of figure out who appears and what domains appear. So if you need some help with that, let me know. Please leave a comment and I'll do my best to help you. And feel free to let me know if any questions about the domains, the NPCs, what the characters are like or anything like that. I'm happy to share more. That's it for this one. Next Ravenloft video, I need to do my part 2 of my Ravenloft Mist Hunters sort of overview run through. It's going to take a while, so if it's not the next Ravenloft video, it might be 1 or 2 away. It might still be a couple of weeks away. Drawing a blank on what else I want to do. I'm currently running the Shadowlands in my home game, which is kind of split up, or it's kind of known as the Shadowlands cluster in Older Lore, and it's made up of sort of like 3 areas. So I might turn that into 3 parts, either do Avonlea or Nadala first, depending on how things go and which one they kind of resolve first. The way things are going, it'll probably actually be Avonlea, even though they arrived via Nadala. And I've been building Turgeron Manor, I think it's pronounced Turgeron or Turgeron. Turgeron, I think. Turgeron Manor in Dungeon Draft, because I couldn't find any top-down maps online. So I was like, oh well, I guess I gotta make some. So you might see those on the Ravenloft subreddit soon. And that's it for this one. Thanks for watching.